Hello there, friends, and welcome back to Axie Tuesday. We've got another great episode here today with someone that has been deep in the Web3 building space. We're going to talk a lot about guilds, we're going to talk a lot about business models, and we're going to talk a lot about the sentiment around Axie. Today, we've got ReadyPlayerDAO's Rich Cabrera. Rich, I don't know what your actual title is. Are you founder, president, CEO? You're something up there, but I'm really excited to have you on here. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Pretty good. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I like to keep it simple and just stick to founder.
Okay.
A lot of the titles just confuse people and who's doing what and all that. So, founder it is, founder Ready Player DAO. Founded back in July of last year. Things were very exciting back then and still are today, just in a different vein, right? I think the space is shifting
Mhm.
in a good way.
Definitely. So I want to hear a little more about you to get started. I like to start a lot of these Axie Tuesdays with origin stories. How did you get first introduced to blockchain? Were you always a believer? Did you, like me, I was in, I was out, I was in, and I was out. It took me a little while to really, commit and see the full potential. I want to hear about your journey down that road. Were you a Bitcoiner to start? Were you always into Ethereum? Hit me with the real talk story here.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were Bitcoiners to start, right?
Yeah.
I definitely play the in and out game, which I wish I did not, right? I think bought my first Bitcoin for like $200 in 2014. And I like to save that email as a reminder um, to have some faith and hold on and not swing trade as much because back then I was just playing the trades and using that to get some beer money for the weekends. I was in college. This weird internet money thing was something I was just poking around with, and then 2017 happened, and Ethereum came to the news and kind of started changing things up a little bit because it wasn't just a currency, right? It was
Hmm.
peer-to-peer application hosting and uh, a lot of things I can actually build with it and use it. And that's when it kind of clicked with me, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then the crash happened, and I was like, all right, maybe I was just it was just too early, or maybe I was getting too excited and people didn't think it was as awesome as I did, and kind of just didn't touch it for a little bit. And then I've always been a gamer and saw Mark Cuban and Alexis Ohanian invested in this weird little game called Axie Infinity. Um, and
Mm.
this was about just over a year ago. It was April 2021, right when Ronin Wallet launched and Ronin Chain launched. And I think that video of people making money playing a video game in the Philippines during COVID was going around.
Oh, the
And I was
the,
like,
uh,
wow,
the YGG one, the play to earn documentary.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the one that sparked, I think, a lot of people's interest and intrigue into Axie Infinity and what Web3 gaming is, right? So yeah, I saw that and I was like, okay, Alexis and Mark Cuban are respectable people, right? I've been following them for a while, so let's check it out. If they believe in it, it's got to be something.
Mhm.
And that's when dove in, and from there it was history. Uh,
Wow.
I don't think there was like a a
So,
single day or week from then until now that I haven't had Axie in my life.
man, that's wild. That's so interesting that your entry point was really based off of this sort of social endorsement, I guess you could say, of these investors and these people that you respected getting into this thing. That's a really cool funnel. I always love to hear the different referral methods. For some people it's a YouTube video, for others it's a family member or a friend, and you're at sort of a different point in the spectrum. And so, what were you doing before that? Were you like day trading or doing like capital market stuff, or was that just a hobby on the side?
No, it was always been a hobby,
I see.
playing around with my money.
Yeah.
I was a solutions architect at a company called Red Hat, working in the public sector. So I was
Hmm.
advising government agencies on modernizing their technology stack, helping them move to the cloud, using some open source and contributing to open source projects, and then training some of government engineers. Worked with like NASA, DOJ, Department of State, USDA. um, and help train them on how to modernize their old government applications.
Wow. All right. I mean,
Fun
that's a hell of a background. That sounds like actually a perfect fit for Web3 because that's sort of what we're doing, right? We're taking these Web2 apps and trying to upgrade them into the Web3 future. You know, maybe not exactly that funnel, but something like that. There's a transition happening at least. So you're like an expert in upgrading technology. Rich, welcome to the future, bud. So that's why your name is Ready Player Rich. It's all starting to connect now.
Oh yeah, let's modernize gaming. This
Wow.
is these honeypots are a bit archaic, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So talk to me about Ready Player DAO a little bit. When did that get started, and what's the vision? You know, I think there's a broader discussion here that we can start to dive into about guilds in general. I've been talking about this blog that I wrote, I guess, as an ongoing arc here on Axie Tuesday. Talked about it with 1437, and that was kind of the catalyst for me to finally push it out and put the final touches on it because I've been working on that thing for a while. Usually, those blogs are something that brews for a pretty long time before it gets to publishing state. You know, it's a lot of conversations at meetups and with different folks, different stakeholders, right? Individuals such as yourself, sometimes people that are just fans, or even like Twitch chatters or people in Discord can ask questions that get your wheels turning and sort of start a chain reaction in terms of a thought chain. So yeah, I'd just love to hear more about Ready Player DAO, what you guys are doing, and you know, really like what is your business model in the play to earn NFT gaming space?
I mean, I think it's definitely shifted as we've matured, right? And I've talked a lot about this, even at some of the conferences recently, at in Amsterdam at 1K Access Alliance conference, and then at AVEX Summit in Barcelona last month. Um, yeah, I think the space is shifting, and a few things are happening, right? People are realizing that sustainable economies don't allow people to just jump in a game, earn money, and then dip out. It's a very like simple game theory approach, and it makes it too easy for people to understand what to do to be the most profitable or maximize their output. Um, so with that writing on the wall, most of these guilds that started as for-profit organizations off of asset lending and asset management, and community management of scholars are going to have to shift. So, we have already embarked on that shift and have moved towards what I like to call the three pillars, which is community, which is the scholars that we have, the group of gamers. We're moving away from the term scholar as well. So our community of gamers that are excited about what's happening in the Web3 game and some of the games that are coming out. And my vision for them is to help them find a game that they're passionate about and enjoy playing, um, and have our community be a lot of the, um, you could call them fanatics of game. Like every game has these fanatics that help push that game forward. They become core contributors to the ecosystem, the game itself, and the community built around it. So that kind of like community as a service model is
Mm,
step one, right? Get our
okay.
gamers in there, fill out the game. We've helped beta test. We've given feedback around tokenomics. We've found certain loops and other things that we give feedback to the games that we partner with. And then we have content marketing. So we want to chase esports. We want to do content creation, tournaments, etc. The traditional, you know, esports organization is
Mhm.
is one that we're gonna start shifting towards and bringing on content creators and helping elevate the Web3 gaming space. So like all the games that we partner with, we want to ensure their success through content as well. And then finally, the third pillar, of course, is like the investment arm. So any games that we think are going to be successful, obviously, we want to be a part of it and have skin in the game. So we invest in equity tokens or NFTs on that
Sure.
side of things.
Totally. Wow, that's a pretty full stack you've got there. A
Yeah.
lot to hone in on, but I'd love to maybe talk about content creation a little bit because I feel like it's harder than ever before to be a successful content creator because there's such a low barrier to entry now. You think about Porter's six forces from your old business school textbook. You know, that's one of the classic one barriers to entry. There's virtually none now. If you got a smartphone, you can start making content. It's pretty incredible what you can do with, kind of the technological multi tools that we have at our disposal now. So, do you have a strategy there? And especially with Web3, it's still pretty polarized, right? The numbers aren't huge. We have a couple of YouTubers that are doing pretty well and have hit that six figures mark of subscribers, but it's not prolific yet. We still don't have these like Mr. Beast level kind of content creators in Web3. So, just curious what the strategy is there, and have you been able to successfully sell, investors and stuff on this premise, given the current state of Web3 content creation that is still, let's call it budding, very early.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen like a big name who's the Web3 content creator yet, and I think there will be one born from this scene and this change in gaming, and I think that's going to be super exciting. I think there will be more than one, of course, but I think we're going to start seeing that as well, like the Web3 Mr. Beast, the Web3 Doctor Disrespect, et cetera,
Mhm.
et cetera. And that's something that we would like to see come to fruition, but we also want to see some of the Web 2 world come to Web 3 as well. So I can't say the name just yet because we're finalizing paperwork, but we are getting ready to have someone who has come from the Web 2 world that has gotten gained interest in the Web 3 world and wants to come over. We're going to help them do that and help them build their community. And I mean, Web 3 is all
Nice.
about community, right?
Yeah.
So having someone that is looking to nurture community and not just extract from what's going on in the space is super important. And we're excited to hopefully announce this partnership in the next week or two.
Nice. Very cool. I laugh mostly because I know exactly how you feel. There's always things in the pipeline, and I hate the announcement of the announcement culture, but at the same time, I kind of get it. I did it a little bit in the esports midseason update. Like, stay tuned, friends. There's things coming. And sometimes that is just honest. I want you to know that we're working on things. And I also am going to be honest and say they're not ready for me to reveal to you what they are. But, um, it's a hard balance to make. Anyway, I wanted to talk about kind of what you pointed out. You didn't use these words, but quality assurance. We help test games. We use our scholars for these games that are in early stage, that are in alpha, and need meaningful feedback. And of course, quality assurance is different from just playing games for fun. It's playing with an intention to test things, break things, and document that journey so that it can be passed back to developers to fix those holes, improve the experience, etc. But there is a huge amount of quality assurance that is just time spent mechanically trying different patterns of things and different combinations in the game to see where the limits are and what can cause crashes and what can trigger bugs. That is an amazing example of a transferable skill that I didn't include in my blog, that I think like a guild could in theory teach scholars to do. Doesn't matter where you're from, really what culture you're in or what language you speak. If you can test games and then boil that down into something that can be communicated and distilled to a developer, that's a great transferable digital skill that is in demand, needed, and actually a specialty that scholars have because scholars are gamers, right? That's the whole point that you're here, is that you're playing games and you like games and you're playing a game. So that's amazing, dude. That's very symbiotic and valuable and profitable, right? That's a service you could in theory charge for if you had scholars that are trained and skilled enough to be able to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think that's like the base level. It's like bootstrapping the project, the games that we are working with and partnering with at a very base level, at a very early stage in the development of that game. As we've seen in Web 3, it's like everything is coming out like pre alpha, right?
Hmm.
And then you get to pre alpha, and then you get to alpha, and it's like beta is 2 years away. So it's something that's like very necessary, but also to be done in a way. that is actually constructive. We've seen a lot of, you know, constructive criticism term being thrown around a lot lately,
Hmm.
but a lot of it, in my opinion, has been more harmful than actually constructive. So, you know, being able to structure your feedback in a way that's beneficial and isn't negative to the project that you're working with is actually extremely important.
Hmm.
Um, and understanding where those projects are in development and how things are flowing. And if you have any experience in the behind the scenes of being a dev, you know, you can understand how these things work, let alone a gaming dev,
Hmm.
right? And we all know, and, you know, I think in the dev world, how much we hate Q&A, but how necessary it is. Uh,
Yes,
the last thing you want is something to go live broken.
totally.
Uh,
No,
so,
I understand completely. And, I've been pointing towards like the AK model when it comes to this. Let's call it constructive criticism, whatever you want to say. AK is very invested in the ecosystem. He's credited for basically popularizing and kind of creating the scholarship model that has been so popular and helped create the surge today. He has great influence in the Axie space, right? So when mistakes are made, when land reveals are disappointing, you know that he's upset, right? He's so invested in this ecosystem. He wants to see it succeed. But you don't see him making these really negative emotional threads on Twitter. What you do see instead are these well thought out, well reasoned, here's the problem, and here's a solution that I think should work, and this is why I think this solution should work, and this is what can happen if we don't apply a solution that works. And that's digestible, right? That's something that we as the developers can take to engineers and say, hey, look at this. These are some really good ideas. What can we take from this? This was offered to us as basically free consulting. This seems reasonable. What can we take here? And that is a much more efficient process than sort of, I don't know how to say it politely, but being maybe a bit more extreme than that, or being less constructive with your intent rather than really trying to focus on what are some potential solutions. Even imperfect solutions are still entertained because sometimes throwing that out there can be a building block for someone else to have an aha moment, right? That's kind of how brainstorming works. Very seldom do you just have it figured out like, I got it, dude. I got the answer. It's like I say something and you go, no, 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 but what about this? And I go, oh, well, actually, that's interesting. And we build until we get to this final point that actually solves the problem. So maybe that's my little soapbox PSA of if you want to maximize your impact and have your voice heard the most, I think that model of being as solutions focused as possible is really important. And sometimes it's also important to identify a problem and say, I don't know what the solution is, but I do think this is a big problem. That is sometimes a key part of the process. But to me, that's really what the nature of constructive is about, though. What are some potential solutions, and how can we push the conversation in that way to start plugging holes? That's really what the end goal is.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a few community members, like AK is the perfect example, but there's a few community members like that, right? And when I talk about like fanatic community members that are contributing to the project's success, like those are the kind of people we're talking about. Like AK, Arctic does great threads as well. You know, Max Brand's an awesome community member, Ouchie, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but you know, and those are the people that are looked up to by the community. You also have, you know, some of the ones that are more arm waving um, on Twitter and doing that stuff, but I don't think they garner as much respect as those community members do, and from both sides, right? So from the people that are critiquing as well as from the project itself,
Yeah.
because they also offer solutions and great breakdowns and into why, because a lot of people can be angry, but they're very hard to find the why and to find the how of the solution.
Hmm. Totally. And some of these problems are big problems that don't necessarily have obvious solutions. But I think there's still discussions worth having. And I'm definitely willing to admit that I think we do need better tooling. I just tweeted that a day or two ago. It's becoming a priority internally. It is a priority now, building out some sort of a system where people that have stake in the Axie universe, be it AXS tokens, SLP tokens, land assets, mystics, whatever, a way to communicate in a way that is sticky and searchable, and parsable, in a way that we can start building a framework to take proposals and propositions and start voting on things. The first step is just a place to discuss some of this stuff and say, hey, you have to have tokens to communicate here. Sorry. There are really great benefits to Twitter in terms of having public dialogue and being able to include people in the conversation that are in crypto, but maybe not in Axie, and maybe trying to win some of them over. That visibility can be good, but we also need a place for ourselves where the thought leaders within Lunacia can engage with other people in Lunacia and start rallying support and start really driving things forward of, hey, this is a priority, and we have a relative consensus from this chunk of the community. That kind of stuff, I think, can be streamlined through better tooling. We've outgrown Twitter and Discord, and that's a sort of a good thing, right? In my mind, that is a really bullish sign, but it does create some road bumps right now until we stand up this process. And it does need to be done right. It's another one of these things that seems really easy, but when the stakes are this high, you have to set it up right. It has to be snapshots or something so that it can't be abused, where you just send tokens to a new address and then you can keep upvoting threads into infinity. There has to be some sort of a limitation so that what tokens are in what wallets, and then it's fair that way. It's hard, Rich. It's really complicated, and the stakes are high if we get it wrong.
It's not a very simple solution, right? And it's not something that we've seen done purely successful elsewhere. But you could look at the open source tech world and learn from things there. I think there's a large benefit of decentralizing and open sourcing community feedback, right? And that's exactly what we're doing here. A great book that I just finished reading, that I would recommend, is The Starfish and the Spider, and it talks a lot about how decentralized organizations have come up and have been successful, and then how the optimal route might be some sort of hybrid decentralized organization where you have some semblance of centralization, but it's built on top of a decentralized network of
Mhm.
contributors and community, that makes it successful, right? And makes it battle hardened, um, and a little bit more stable.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the best place to start is from that space, and I think that's where Axie's moving towards. I think we all know previously it's been very centralized, but I think this is a step in the right direction, which is something I'm really excited about. I know I've had my fair share of tweets about, like, let's get governance going, and you always hear people saying, it's not ready, it's not ready, but um, I- in my opinion, that's like a very hard case to argue.
I think we need to figure out a way to be ready. If
Right.
it's true that we're not, then we need to prioritize getting ready, because we need to ease into governance. I used to say this when I started a year ago. It's not like we're gonna build this thing up and then just hand the Ferrari to the 18-year-old. You got to give them the Honda Civic first. Maybe you graduate to the Porsche. Um, it
Yeah.
needs to be eased in. We need to get used to voting on simple things, cosmetic things, titles, like stuff that is just getting people into the habit of communicating, discussing, learning how to use the infrastructure, us testing the infrastructure on things that are relatively small stakes, and then building up to stuff that has higher stakes, and then having these real impactful governance decisions. And of course, it'll always be somewhat centralized, because someone has to control what the proposals are, and what are the things that we are voting on. I think I've said this before, but it's a very different structure to say, hey, community, let's build a game together, and hey, community, we've built this core game, let's iterate on it together and improve it. The second one, I think, is a much more likely successful outcome than the first one, where you don't have that unified vision and direction. So I think DAO voting is very similar, saying, hey, what percentage should this thing be, is very different from what should the thing be. Uh, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a little too abstract, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, like, when we talk about this on Twitter, it's very difficult because you're limited to 140 characters, right? And then on Discord, there's just a lot of noise.
Hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, we're not going to jump in straight to like, all right, what are we going to do with the treasury today? Everybody vote,
Yeah.
and have someone send themselves all the money, right? I think the beginning of things would be like, here's a Sky Mavis approved, document, and we're trying to figure out one or two ways that we want to go with this direction. Vote for A or B. This is like the very simplest,
Hmm.
minute form of community activity and feedback offering, but it's the start that we build on top of as we work towards a more well structured governance system, where potentially maybe in the future people can put forward proposals, but it's set to a rigorous process
Hmm.
that determines whether or not those proposals actually go for a vote and what they can be for. Like, potentially, we never have a scenario where someone can put a proposal to move all of the funds ever, right?
Yeah.
That's just part of the process of like, this is just not something that's going to be available to be proposed, right?
Yeah.
But maybe like allocating a certain amount of a budget that was already pre-approved and pre-voted on and configured for a certain
Right. Like,
function.
let's put some guardrails on the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's put
Uh,
seatbelts in it.
yeah, it's not like we're gonna. It's not like you either get nothing or you get thrown into the volcano.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a
Totally.
lot of in between there.
Yeah. No, definitely. Wow. We just went down a hell of a rabbit hole. I love it. And I do love talking about this stuff because, I'm coming up on my 1 year anniversary at Sky Mavis, and I might have just hit it actually. I think it was maybe May 1st. Oh shit, I missed my Twitter thread day. All right, I need to work on this while I'm flying out to Iceland. Um, man, that's wild, first of all. I've been here a year, Rich. I know you and I probably got in around the same time. So, congratulations on your 1 year anniversary as well. April, May babies 2021. Let's go. Together we
Congrats.
build. But the governance aspect really appealed to me. I've always enjoyed this anti-authoritarian. I was into punk rock in high school. I studied AP government. I took 2 AP courses my senior year, statistics and government, and everyone made fun of me for making the weirdest combination of things and having no vision for my future. And now I look back and go, I was just training. I was in training for this. I've been preparing all my life, Rich. This is the intersection of all the things that I love: gaming, esports, economies, like governance structures, and public goods, and all of that bundled into one giant ecosystem. This is a hell of an experiment, and it's like a privilege to be a part of it. And yeah, sorry, now I'm just glowing. You got me all excited. I'm gushing, Rich. You
Oh,
pulled it out of
I,
me somehow.
I'm right there with you. And that's what drew me to Web3. It's the same reason why I enjoyed working in open source and a company like Red Hat, is because Web3 natively, and if done actually in a Web3 decentralized manner, is a meritocracy, right? So no one cares about your age, your gender, your sex, your preferences, your et cetera, et cetera. They care about what you're doing, what you're building, how you contribute. And that's the beauty of like the non anonymity in voting, and
Yeah,
anonymity and contribution of open source, and the anonymity of a lot of these PFPs that we see in Web3. It's like, if you don't want anybody to know, no one has to know, right?
totally.
And you're being judged on your contributions to the space. And that's, I think, very utopian
Yeah.
relative to the political space of Web 2.
No, I think that's amazing. And now maybe this is slightly polarizing, so I do apologize. But in theory, I agree with you. And I think to a large degree, that's very true, especially relative to traditional spaces. Amy kind of said that on the last Axie Tuesday that we did, mentioned that it's a space where I can just sit back and write code, and people can look at my code and judge me based on that. And that is a very cool, like, level playing field that is definitely appealing to be competing in. And I think that's really cool. But we definitely do still have some lines, and I don't know where the lines are. But there was that guy at ENS who posted some stuff that I would consider hateful, that I disagree with, but they are kind of in line with the religion that he was a part of. I would agree that he probably didn't need to broadcast it so loudly, but there is also part of me that feels like Yeah, it's hard if you're if you're a part of a religion that's not super inclusive, it's really hard to fit into this space. And I guess I'm just not sure how to reconcile that. Is that full meritocracy? I don't know what's fair. It's a super delicate topic. If somebody writes amazing code, but they're part of a religion that has some pretty strong lines on really key polarizing topics that maybe you and I would disagree with, what do we compartmentalize and what do we say, okay, we can't tolerate this? I don't know. I don't know where that balance is.
Yeah,
It's tricky.
that's something that has come up in the open source world before too, right? And I think that's the biggest um, hurdle for true decentralization and meritocracies to come over, right? Because that does happen, um, and then it
It's like the meta
becomes
of inclusivity. Like, are we so
yeah,
inclusive that we include people that aren't really inclusive themselves? You know?
like true freedom of speech. Do you include those that are against freedom of speech?
Yeah, and like there's like it's not like a fine line, right? There's some sort of gray area there that is a little bit hard to rule on. So it is like I have anecdotally heard from a handful of community members that weren't like upset, but just mentioned at meetups, like, I'm religious and I don't feel comfortable disclosing that or talking about that on Twitter or like in public because it feels like this space is very, atheistic or looks down upon religious people in a certain way. And it's just not worth it. Like all things equal, I'd rather my anonymous avatar on the internet be neutral when it comes to that. But as an individual, me as a person right now talking to you, it doesn't feel particularly inclusive for folks that are ultra religious. And I don't know. I guess I've spent some time thinking about that, and I'm still noodling on it. I haven't figured out what the powerful outcome is there. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this conversation. I guess I just wanted to throw out there that it's a heavy topic, maybe worth thinking about, that we should all just ponder on a little bit. Let it stew and think about. Be open to
Yeah,
discussing in the future. Sorry, Rich.
yeah.
Now I feel bad. I feel like I threw some hardcore social justice stuff at you for no reason. This is not your.
No, I mean it's a great topic of discussion, and I think a lot. It might not be as pertinent to Axie specifically. We are on Axie Tuesday, but
True.
it's a topic.
Well, it is
Decentralization
it is
community.
related to Axie though, because Axie is this really global platform, and I'll tie it back in right now. A key community member said to me not so long ago, 10K PFP collections are cool, and they're proving that they can have a big impact on the space and on the world. But there's only 10,000 of them, and if we truly think this space is early, and we see Axie with 10 million DAUs or 100 million DAUs, like Axie is actually fit to scale to provide value to 100 million gamers if we can get there. A 10K PFP collection struggles to do that. And it can launch more and you can do serums, and there are ways to expand it, of course, but it's not really designed to do that. It's almost designed to be scarce. Axies are kind of designed to be bred. So it is a really cool, big platform that is global in nature. And I think the art style, the base, just the base creativity of Lunacia is very appealing to a wide demographic of gamers and a wide demographic of personality types. So it is an interesting topic to consider. How do we make sure Axie is an inclusive place for all people across all cultures? I had a conversation with somebody about onboarding a bunch of players from Pakistan. I don't know how much I have in common with people from Pakistan in person. I've not met many people from Pakistan, if I'm being perfectly honest, in my personal life. But I'm excited to meet them, and I'm excited to have an open mind and welcome them into our community, as long as they're willing to have an open mind of what exists in our community. And I think that's a pretty fair social contract, and I think that's a really important part of our Axie culture. So I don't know. I actually don't think we're that far off base, man. I think it's really cool that Axie is a platform like that can be so globally appealing and connect. Like, I think Axie is in every country in the world except North Korea. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. But yeah, I mean, where I was kind of going with that was like, at what point do you kind of like disengage your heart, or your like religious beliefs and other beliefs from yourself, and participate in the Axie community or whatever open source decentralized community or project solely for furthering that project? And I think a lot of like our discussions about other aspects of people that aren't as inclusive as the space itself, and how that affects um, you know meritocracy and decentralization, I think it just boils down to like how much of yourself is tied to that, and how strong willed you are in pushing that aspect of yourself forward. And I think like you're allowed to be, religious or anti-religious or agnostic or etc. And still contribute to the same projects as long as it doesn't conflict with the ideals of said project.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, the like pure freedom of speech, decentralization, meritoc- meritocratic approach to those things. But
Yeah.
I think it also will upset some people that feel marginalized by some of those beliefs, which is fair,
Yeah,
but
exactly. And
it's
that's what makes this so complicated. There's a lot of valid perspectives on a lot of sides. And I think very few projects are truly global in nature like that. You know, there are some brands out there like Coca-Cola, for example. I think that's in probably every country except North Korea. There probably are some Cokes in North Korea, to be honest. Um, there
actually
are
in as well.
yeah, there are
Um,
brands like that, but they're completely different kind of like consumer products. Whereas we're trying to build this public good and this tool that can be used across global cultures and a DAO that's accepting of all these people across the entire planet. This is a hell of an initiative, man. I mean, I think it has to be complicated. It has to be nuanced. This is a really big system we're building. So this is sort of just the very start of being able to navigate some of you know the community decisions that will really lead into where some of those lines get drawn. That's the beauty of the DAO. It is eventually going to be determined by mostly the community, I think.
yeah, this is a human platform, not a
Well
not an
said.
American platform or a Filipino platform or X race platform. It's a human platform.
I
So
love
there's
that.
no national boundaries, there's no racial boundaries or sexual boundaries or gender boundaries, etc. Right? So we need to build for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, so on that regard, we also need to get Land SDK up so we can build gaming experiences for everybody too.
That I agree with entirely. I definitely, I know the land SDK is far away, so I don't want to imply that it's close, but as just a community member, when I bought my first plot of land, that is absolutely the number one thing that was on my mind. What kind of sick mini game can I build on my plot? How much can I charge to get people to come play Zyori's tower defense? I see a huge ceiling on the potential when we open up that sandbox for people to build in. But yeah, maybe we could pivot to something a little less intense and talk about esports a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you read the mid-season update that was just recently published here. Curious to hear your thoughts maybe about this transition from Axie Classic to Axie Origin. Any thoughts about season one, how we turn on earnings for Origin? I'd love to just hear your thoughts around all of this because we are taking a very agile approach and listening to feedback and trying to update Origin as quickly as we can, and execute this iterative process based on community feedback.
Yeah, yeah. I think obviously it's very difficult, but I'll like point to something that I know well, which is like blue green deployments in tech. So generally, like in tech, when you're deploying an update, there's a few different names for this, but to prevent any downtime of your application, you have like a short period in time where both versions of the application are running and you slowly wean off of the old version and
Mhm.
everybody onto the new version. So anytime the browser's refreshed, you could instantly be pointed over to the new version. And that's an approach to pushing updates without having any downtime or outage experience for your users. Not saying that's like something necessary here, but there's a lot of community members that I've seen that are in support of saving V2. I think I've seen it a few times
Mhm.
around Twitter, and I'm wondering, like, if the wean off is potentially like, as we ramp up and turn on the earnings and the rewards for Origin, we could wean off of SLP earnings for V2, but potentially keep tournaments around for like a season or two as the
Yeah.
competitive scene starts to migrate and build out. And that could be like a semblance of some sort of blue green deployment on that in that regard.
That's a good suggestion, and I don't have all the answers. Again, we're taking an agile approach, so things can change quickly as they make sense. But I think once Origin has earnings turned on, if people still want to play version 2 or Axie Classic just for fun with no earnings attached, but just play in custom lobbies and be able to play in tournaments with each other in completely third party supported prize pools, that kind of thing, I don't see any reason why that would not be okay. Obviously, our effort is to support Axie Origin moving forward as the primary product, but I don't see any reason to turn off the service, even if earnings are turned off. If there are still people that need to do things on Classic, there certainly will be some tournaments that might need to finish as well. One of the things that we suggested in the guidelines is, hey, if you started qualifiers for Axie Classic, the tournament should finish on Axie Classic. Don't switch it halfway through because they're very different games, and it's just not fair. It's not commensurate with competitive spirit. So we're definitely going to have to leave Axie Classic running for all of the tournaments on the current grant that are committed to Axie Classic to finish out whatever they need to do. So that I feel comfortable almost like guaranteeing off the cuff because those tournaments have to be fair and balanced. So I guess we'll see, but it does seem like that there's enough of a demand that I can't imagine Axie Classic just being turned off, thrown in the waste bin, and then never seen again. That seems inappropriately harsh. I don't know why we got to do that to a game that treated us so well, Rich.
Let us keep playing the retro games.
Yeah. And I think kind of that's a good way to put it, like a retro arcade game almost. A relic of what Axie used to be, a true Axie Classic mode. I'm not sure, and I don't know that it's my final decision. And it is a hard thing. It's not very often, certainly in like the play to earn environment, where you see a game transition like this. Where yes, Axie Origin is a completely different game, but it's also not a completely different game. It has a lot of similarities to Classic, right? There's a lot of parallels, similar spirit of a lot of the cards, all these sorts of things. So it does feel like a very unique transition in a number of ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's you know, I think there's still like a learning curve to Origin, and I think gamers in general are kind of um, I guess not slow to accept the changes, but generally don't accept them immediately. And I think that could be part of it. So like as they start to ramp up and learn Origin and the cards and the gameplay and the different strategies and comps and stuff like that, they'll be more receptive to it. And I know there's obviously still a lot of updates and changes to come with Origins and how things work out. So like we also wouldn't want to rush into like shutting one off and jumping into the other either.
Yeah.
So I think it would make sense to at least keep the service alive. Maybe do a final tournament, final season,
Mm,
uh, you know, and only have earnings through the tournament.
I see.
Uh,
Like a final banger event.
yeah,
A proper send off.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's food for thought. That's definitely something to consider. I think. Again, just at face value, I have trouble coming up with a strong counter argument as to why that wouldn't make sense. So maybe that's something I'll throw in the old notepad there. I'm gonna miss Axie Classic. I'm not gonna lie. It really. I love Axie Classic and I love Axie Origin. I do enjoy playing Origin more. I did a little test for myself where I played a few games of Origin and then just went right into like, let me play some Axie Classic. I like right back to back. How do I feel? And I lost 2 Axie Classic matches in a row, both in the 1v1 on the final turn where it was like somebody was going to kill somebody, and I messed up my speed combo and I got so mad. I almost threw my phone out the window. So, yeah, I'm okay with Axie Origin. I like it, but Axie Classic is it's a unique game. It really is something pretty cool. And I will always have a little bit of nostalgia for it, no doubt. It almost feels it's like I play Dota 2 now. I don't enjoy playing Dota 1 anymore, but I still have nostalgia for it. I've booted it up a couple times and it's miserable. Dota 2 is just better. I've come to accept it, and I think that's how I'll feel about Axie Classic in the future. It's
And
nostalgic and great, but on to bigger and better things, in my humble opinion.
yeah, I think that's how most will feel, especially a few months from now.
Mhm. And people just don't like change in general. I mean, I remember this happened in Dota when they added the talent trees where you had the extra skills for your heroes. And people hated it at first. And then over time, it was like, no, this is awesome. This is
Yeah.
better. This is just better. More choices, more customization. So it is sometimes human psychology, but that's also what makes game design hard is that people don't like change. And sometimes change is for the better of the system, but it's hard for people to see in the short term. But it can also make you a little bit immune to feedback from the audience because you're tempted to say, no, you just don't like change. That doesn't mean that every change is good, right? Sometimes changes are bad, and that feedback is just objectively because you could have made a better decision. So that's the forever challenge, I think, is distilling what is people being resistant to change and what is people genuinely saying, no, this is not a good mechanic.
Yeah, and you also want like complexity in game theory and complexity in the game loops and like core game decisions. And I think that's one of the things with Axie Classic. It was definitely was a lot of fun, and obviously there's gonna be like slightly different strategies depending on who's on the other side of the screen. Um, but the difference in approaches that you could take were very limited by the four cards that each Axie had, right? So you have like those 16 cards, and there's a limited amount of strategies. But with additional cards and runes and charms, there's additional both offensive and defensive strategies that can be taken with your teams. You're not stuck with, okay, this guy. What as soon as I get down to 1v1, these are the exact cards I'm going to play no matter what every single time.
Yeah,
Like that's something like cheesy plays that we used to do in V2 all the time, and I think that changes a little bit with Origin and adds a little more complexity to the game, and it gives different experiences every time someone's actually playing the game.
yeah,
And I think that's what makes a good game. It's like anything can happen. Let's boot this up and see what's going to happen.
yeah.
Like live through this new experience every time I challenge someone and face someone in the arena.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. That's really what separates esports and competitive games from just regular games is because there's that player versus player element in a sandbox that has an insane amount of different combinations in terms of like even if you think about Counter-Strike, map positioning, gun selection, all these different kind of counterplay opportunities, no match is ever identical to one that you've played before. It's always a little bit different. Same with League of Legends or Dota, with all the champions, all the different items, all the different combinations for lane positionings. No match is ever the same as any other match you played before. So every time it's a unique experience, despite being the exact same framework that feels comforting and familiar. And like you said, that is the hallmark of a true masterpiece game when it has that level of replayability and depth and skill cap, and it's hard enough that you keep coming back because you seldom can play perfect. You can even when you win and you dominate, you can look back and go, yeah, but I still could have done better. I still could have done this more optimally. That's what we need to build towards. That's the stuff that keeps me coming back at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Esports competitive modes will be something else to figure out for Origin with runes and charms now. We figured out this game mode for Origin, like this 10-1, and we need to figure out what's next for Origin. I think we need more testing. We need to run some like Origin tournaments with unlimited pools and figure out what makes sense there. But I think that'll be another key layer to really unlock the competitive potential of Origin. And how, maybe it's like you bring a certain amount of team comps, you bring 5 teams, and then it's the first to win 3, but you have to use 3 different teams to win. Once you win with one team, you can't use it again in the series. So you can add all sorts of, strategy and kind of game theory layers on top of just the gameplay itself based on trying to read your opponent in terms of what they have in their pool and what you have in your pool and those sorts of things.
Yeah, how are you guys thinking through like runes and charms and tournaments? Is there going to be any kind of limit to those, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's hard to answer because it seems like some of the limits that I would have suggested to answer that question have already been implemented. When you could use 3 Heart of the Oceans, my suggestion was, okay, let's just say unique or mystic runes are unique, so you can only use one of each. They're like, yeah, that's really good. We like that. Let's put it into the game. I can't claim credit for it, but that's a layup. So okay, great. That's one off the list. We're a little more competitive now. So I think it depends a little bit. It also depends on the rarity numbers and how that shakes out. How rare are the mystic runes and charms? I think this is one where I look towards World of Warcraft. You know, I played in one of the competitive arena seasons to try to qualify for BlizzCon. Obviously, didn't qualify, but I did make the top 1,000. Proud to say, we made the first cutoff. And their approach was, okay, for the tournament mode, you go on this private server and it's full sandbox. You're just unlocked all the items, and everybody's on the same level playing field. And then that way, it's truly competitive, truly fair. Nobody has the ultra legendary item that does extra damage or anything like that. But obviously, those items exist in the main World of Warcraft game client. You only get this sandbox mode in a limited, like, hey, for these 3 months, these are the qualifiers for BlizzCon. You can practice on this server. Once the qualifiers are over, this server's going away and it's all getting nuked. So it's imperative that we build something that doesn't take away from the value of what's happening on ladder and the value and ownership of runes and charms, but we will probably need some sort of a limited sandbox mode that can be used just for tournaments where there's some sort of a level playing field where people have access to the same number of runes or charms or something like that. I think we need more data to figure it out, and we need a little bit more testing to see what those decisions are, and then I think we can calibrate the esports mode around that. So, oh, I see a doggy in the background. So sorry, that's a little bit of look at that, a little bit of an open-ended answer, but it's an honest one. You know, I think it's hard to say until we just have a little bit more iteration and a few more data points. What a cutie pie.
Yeah, he's just napping on the
Wow.
couch. Looks like he wants to go play now. Yeah, I mean, there's that yawn. Uh, no, I think that makes sense, and honestly, I think that's like the one of the cleaner solutions moving forward. Maybe like potentially there's tournaments that are third party hosted where they're like, okay, you can only bring one mystic, one of each category of runes or charms. But I think the sandbox unlock everything approach makes a lot of sense, especially for um, high price pool tournaments, because the last thing you want is like, oh, they used a rune or charm that there's only 10 of in the world and just gave them an insane advantage. And
Yeah.
I'm a good player, though. If I had that, I would have won, etc. Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the better paths forward. Although there are a lot of good suggestions that could make for exciting tournaments, but probably for smaller prize pools and more for fun than actual competition. Right.
Yeah. I think the intention is to find some way to calibrate it. And we are definitely going to do it tactfully and fairly and in a way that is very conscious of not detracting from the value of actually crafting runes and charms, because you can just get them for free in the sandbox mode. We don't want it to be like that. The sandbox mode will be highly limited and just, like you said, kind of for these high-end tournaments. And then we'll use this data to build into a full-fledged like drafting mode that, once we have lobbies, it could be in the game client directly, and you just select, okay, I want to play the esports mode because we're participating in a tournament for this match, that kind of thing. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So it's exciting times ahead. I'm so bullish on Axie Esports right now. We're in these very, very early phases. Like if Axie's in alpha, Axie Esports is in like pre-alpha, something like that. That's been my little line that I've used on some outside folks that I've been talking to, various team organizers, tournament organizers. There's a lot of people looking at the space, Rich. I think for people like yourself, you're positioned really well for like consulting and just being a thought leader. When these organizations get sold, the last question on the call is always, well, how do I know which Axies to buy, or what are the good ones for battling so I can start doing stuff? And that's where I can't advise. That's where an expert like you or ReadyPlayerDAO can come in and say, hey, we can help you advise on how to start your breeding farm or how to build teams that are going to be successful for your scholars or your pro players. I think that's going to be a big piece of how guilds like yourself can fit into the ecosystem as more of these Web 2 Goliaths come in, but know that they have blind spots and need help filling those blind spots.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that's exactly how I started the whole Ready Player thing. Um, so like, yeah, May of last year, I had started my own personal guild. It was just me running it, and started to realize that a lot of people wanted to get an Axie but didn't know how, and started accepting individual investors and managing their Axie teams and picking teams and buying teams for them. And then eventually enough of them were like, let's do a DAO. So my like mini Axie Scholar program and trying to just help people get into the space and learn about Web3 gaming, learning about Axies and all that stuff is how Ready Player DAO came to be, and it looks like that's
Good.
part of the future forward too.
Totally.
Full
No,
circle.
it's a big gap, and as we both know, as full time folks in the Web3 space, it moves really fast. And if you're not full time focused on this, it's so easy to feel left behind or completely underwater with all these different moving parts and all these projects, all these blockchains, all these NFTs, tokens, and how they all cross over with each other and who's aligned, who isn't. It gets complicated quick. So these organizations, understandably, need help navigating this space. And as more of them get sold on a high level, we're going to need more funnels to help educate them, help them jumpstart, and also more importantly, provide them with value. You know, make sure that they have a positive experience and understand what they're doing. Obviously, it is easy to lose money on Axie breeding if you don't know what you're doing. If you're just breeding randomly, would not suggest that for anyone. You know, you want to be tactful and you know want to do it with a specific strategy in mind of what you're trying to breed for. And that's how you really optimize for the W. So anyway, I think that's really cool. And when I hear guilds say, "Where do we fit in right now?" I know it's hard to see; it's impossible to see some of these back channel discussions, but there are a lot of big eyes on the Web3 gaming space in general. Definitely the esports space, and when it comes to NFT gaming esports, we're the ones kind of pushing the needle forward right now, you know, and Axie's just barely at this alpha point where we can start experimenting with it. This is as early as it gets. So I know we say that a lot. I hate that it's become such an overused meme, but yeah, this is the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge, bud. This is as cool as it gets. Congratulations, Rich. You found it.
Yeah, that's always the yeah the hard thing to do, right? And once you know you're there, it's that's why I was like, all right, I had this job that I liked, but this is a revolution in gaming that's happening, right? So I had to be a part of it
Yeah.
uh, and jump over. Once you find that, once you realize that, that's where a lot of the conviction comes from.
Totally. And I often say to people, we don't have all the answers, but I think the problems that Ethereum and Web3 are trying to solve, you know, those of us that are maybe a little more focused on the public goods side and utility NFTs and this stuff, some of the problems that it's trying to solve, I think, are worth chipping away at and super fascinating. And more importantly, when you start going to conferences and meeting other people in the space, you realize that 10% of builders that are really pushing it all forward are some of the smartest minds in the technical world that have really big aspirations and some of the technical chops to start you know, achieving some of those aspirations. So I feel like it's a privilege to be building in this space. I really do. It excites me greatly. I still feel more motivated than ever, even though sentiment is kind of negative and there's some bearish conditions right now. It's the place to be, man. This is way more satisfying than telling jokes on Twitch to a bunch of teenagers watching Dota. I'm not going to lie to you. This feels a lot more substantive, a lot more soul food here.
It actually feels like you're doing something uh, more than just for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Uh, which is like very important. And I think yeah, there's you mentioned the bearish sentiment, and I think that's like all over the place in crypto and also in the Web2 markets. But one thing I'll say is like most of these whales that most of these super successful people are the ones that stuck through it and survived through the last bear. And these are all market cycles that happen on a global scale.
Mhm.
Um, and if you're building during the bear, you're going to be having fun during the bull.
Well said. I like that very much in the spirit of the Axie environment, having built through so much bear market time in its existence. Wow. Well, Rich, this was an absolute pleasure. I feel like this was really a dense, action-packed Axie Tuesday. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you entertaining me down some of these rabbit holes. And so glad to have you building in the Axie space, man. Really excited about what you guys are doing at Ready Player DAO. Keep it up. Excited to see some of your esports initiatives. Would love to see you guys host another tournament or two in the future when we have future grants. And Yeah, maybe it's time to shill your projects. You know, where can people find stuff? Where can they follow you? Where can they follow Ready Player DAO? Where can they stay on the pulse?
Yeah, so we have our community Discord, which you can find through our Twitter at ReadyPlayerDAO, and then I'm at ReadyPlayerRich. We will have more tournaments coming in the pipeline. We're just waiting for that competitive Origins so that we can push that forward. And then obviously, I mentioned we're getting ready to announce a big partnership and new member of Ready Player DAO, and we also might have some sort of drop coming up in the next
Whoa.
2 to 4 weeks. So
Whoa.
stay tuned for any community gamers.
More like Ready Player Wow. Okay, let's do it. That's hype. Well, exciting stuff. A lot to look forward to. Make sure you give them a follow, folks. This is where the building is happening. All right. Well, Rich, I'll let you get out of here. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us on Axie Tuesday. Folks, you know where to find us by now, but if you're new to Axie Tuesday or you joined us late, you can find it on YouTube, youtube.com/AxieInfinity. And if you're watching on YouTube, well, maybe you could join us live next time, every other Tuesday, usually midday around that 10 a.m. Pacific time. Although if old Zyori's on the road, sometimes we got to shuffle things around. So stay tuned to the Twitter, twitter.com/AxieInfinity for all the updates, and we'll see you on the next Axie Tuesday.